All right, Kiss Army, welcome to the KissFAQ Podcast. Thank you for giving us your time today and letting us into your head. I hope we don't do any damage. This is a Kiss-related podcast by the board for the board. We hope that you enjoy.
All right, so welcome to episode 197 of the KissFAQ Podcast. I'm your host, Julian Gill, and I'm alone. I'm sitting in my room in Nashville. It's the morning after the Rockin' Pod Expo 2. So it's probably time to start going through a bit of the audio that I captured yesterday. And first part of this show is going to be interviews with many of the podcast folk and a couple of special guests who I conducted yesterday at the Rockin' Pod Expo. I must say it's very important to give Criss, Zach, BJ Kahuna, Tracy, all of those involved in the organization of the Rockin' Pod Expo a shout out. There's probably a lot of unnamed people who contributed to making this event happen, to making it a success, and to making it absolutely amazing. Obviously, flying in from San Francisco, I needed it to be amazing. Nah, I didn't. I just needed it to be fun. But it was absolutely incredible. The number of people who I was blessed to interact with over the weekend and yesterday in particular at the event, absolutely incredible. I love and respect the feedback that we've received about our show in particular, about podcasting in general, about the band and bands that we love. It was great to talk to so many people about these things. It was wonderful to have folk bring in copies of books that they've purchased over the year and ask me to autograph. I'm always absolutely bemused that anyone would want my autograph, but I am also amazed that people have supported so many of these projects over the years, and it's like seeing your children come home in some ways, having those books end up on your table again. So thank you again for your support of all of the projects that I've been involved in over the years. Thank you very much for your support of my podcast, our podcasts. We need your ears. We appreciate your time listening to these shows, and we respect that you're giving us your time in order to listen to us, and that's a very important thing from my point of view. So again, thank you all. The Expo, it was insane. There were so many special guests featured at this event that, again, Criss did an incredible job pulling things together, often in the face of adversity. There were challenges in putting an event of this scale together. This year, it took place at the Nashville Palace, which is very close to the hotel in which I'm staying. I love the venue. We had booths, which would be used for, I guess, restaurant style. To podcast out of, very comfortable. Atmosphere was very, I guess, Tennessee. It was country, a little bit rock and roll. But it was comfortable. Air conditioning, hallelujah. Thank you. But there was a cavalcade of guests. Some of the standouts were obviously the guys from Angel who performed the night before at the Mercy Lounge. The guys from Starz. There was Troy Lucetta from Tesla, of course, which was actually the first band I ever saw live. There were just so many different people. Toby Wright, producer of Alice in Chains, Kiss's Carnival of Souls. I mean, I don't have the list in front of me of everyone who was a guest, but Craig Gass and Courtney Condold, comedians extraordinaire who'll be performing tonight. So a lot of guests, a lot of people. I signed up for 3 interviews, which went very well. One of them, unfortunately, was lost due to extremely challenging recording circumstances. It was loud in there, as you'll be able to tell from the recordings that I put up today. We were having to talk quite loud to one another, so I do warn you, you may need to adjust your volume between all of the interviews and segments. And I do apologize, but I think the content is more important than having to fiddle with a dial. Well, actually, we don't do that anymore. Technically, we all do it electronically, whatever, not to be pedantic. So we're just going to jump into them, and we'll go from there. So I hope you enjoy this recap of the incredible Rockin' Pod Expo. So here's to Rockin' Pod 3. Let's make it happen. Thanks for your support. Bye.
All right, so this is Julian at the Rockin' Pod in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm joined by Gary Schaller, a member of, what's your podcast?
PodKISSt, the Kiss fanzine for your ears. Not to be confused with For Your Rear, that's different.
And it is, of course, the gold standard in KISS podcasting for many, many years. You're one of the big boys who've been around for a very, very long time, done a lot of massive episodes. Tell us the history of why a KISS podcast.
I started listening to podcasts in 2005. I was living in New York, and we were going to move to California. And I needed something to pass the time. I was in between jobs. And I actually started listening to Star Wars podcasts, which is my other main obsession, and didn't know what a podcast was, and went looking for things to listen to, and discovered this whole kind of untapped vein of audio entertainment, and figured there hadn't been, I guess there'd been one KISS podcast for about a hot minute in 2004 or thereabouts.
I didn't pay any attention to podcasting way back when, so I would not have noticed.
I have a funny feeling like there was maybe one KISS podcast one time briefly, and it didn't last. And so I started it up with James Hager and Ken Mills, and it's taken on a life of its own. Christine Wolf, Christine the Button Queen, who's a part of many, many podcasts, counted it up recently and ran the numbers, and we've got 241 plus hours total of podcasts to listen to just on PodKISSt alone since 2006 or 7. So you could go for a day and still not hear everything.
Just think of the money you could make in syndication with that amount of material.
Right.
And I think Christine...
Or 10 days, right.
Christine should really just be called the Queen because she does so much for everyone. And last year she put together buttons for anyone who wanted them. So Christine, you're appreciated. We love what you've done to help everyone. You've been so willing to help everyone. And, that's awesome to be part of the community.
Oh, for sure. She's great. And we're so blessed and grateful to have as many amazing, enthusiastic people. I'm just looking across here, this enormous room. It's pretty packed. Things are going very well. And a big shout out to Criss Sinzak and BJ Cramp also for putting this whole thing together. What an amazing event.
Yeah, and Tracy for doing the scheduling.
Tracy.
With all the talent that us podcasts are going to be enjoying today. So I got to ask you, you've been around the game for a long time when it comes to KISS. I always like to ask people who come on our shows, favorite KISS album, your first KISS album, and what color of Kool-Aid you drink.
Man, that's great. First KISS album was Gene Simmons' solo album, the 78 KISS record. And then KISS Alive I got shortly after, both on vinyl with all the posters and books and doodads in there. Favorite KISS album, that's a hard one. I think it's always like a neck and neck between Alive and Unmasked for me, with Creatures and Destroyer and a hell of a lot of them being a close second or third. Yeah, I love Unmasked, even though it's a weird album and they're not all really on it, and it's
got some very well crafted pop songs.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what Vinnie Poncia brought to the situation, that he did a lot of editing that they actually need as a band, except for Ace's stuff. I don't think anyone touched Ace's tremendously, but Paul's stuff in particular. But I think he really has some very strong pop pretensions that you kind of hear coming across throughout the years, but that he became much more comfortable with, particularly on Unmasked and then into the 80s, and gave birth to the power ballad that he'd include on just about every album.
Totally, yeah. And I mean, I think history will hopefully remember that era and that kind of music more kindly as time goes on, because like you said, it's really well-crafted pop music. It's just good fun, good fun stuff.
So what would you think about Paul Stanley ripping into Tomorrow?
Jesus.
In concert?
I would love to hear it with the full power of Eric Singer's backing vocals and all the harmonies that can happen, get the audience singing along. I always thought it'd be neat. I know this is probably an unpopular opinion, but for them to add like a keyboard player that's visible on stage and have it be like a really cute woman in KISS makeup, and just have her like be a part of the band to offset the sound and play songs like that. A
bit of backing vocals like Motley Crue did in Girls, Girls, Girls era with I can't remember, Emmy and the other gal who weren't treated like strippers. They were treated as proper backing vocalists, as part of the band almost, rather than being put in a cage and hung in some unfortunate kind of manner.
Right.
some Kissettes on stage would actually be kind of cute.
It wouldn't be bad, and I think that like any other change, people would fight it and resist it, and then they would probably be okay with it.
Well, Uncle Gene, you heard it here first, so if you like that idea, you can send the check to Gary Schaller at PodKISSt. We know you know who they are.
TM. That's it. And what color Kool-Aid? I guess I'd have to go for the red Kool-Aid because Gene. Gene's my favorite member of Kiss. That was the first album. So I'll go with red Kool-Aid. What about you? Well, I know some of this, but...
Well, obviously, my first Kiss, I get to always kind of mess around with this and say, well, my first album's Asylum. I only got into the band because of MTV and those 3 videos. I think Who Wants to Be Lonely didn't come out until early 86, but Tears Are Falling got me into the band and made me go back and discover the catalog. Favorite album? That's a tough one. And, when we ask people their favorite albums, it can change depending on our mood at the moment. But I think the one I go back to the most is Rock and Roll Over. The guitar work, the production, the reaction to, as much as I love Destroyer, it got them back to being a gritty rock and roll band. Even though there's a couple of cuts on that album, which we can definitely say are filler, it's killer filler. So as for Kool-Aid, it was Paul Stanley in 1985 who made me a fan. It's Paul Stanley to this day is the heart and soul of the band. He's carried it in so many ways. And as much as I love and respect Peter Criss, Ace Frehley, Bruce Kulick, Eric Singer, every member who's ever been in the band, Paul has got bandages and scars from carrying that band when Gene was off doing his own thing. So Paul Stanley is the man to this day. So give me purple Kool-Aid any day.
Paul has literal bandages and scars, right?
Oh, yeah, he's run into railings, he's knocked himself out, he's torn his rotator. I mean, the guy is a wounded warrior of rock.
Nothing, for me, nothing beats when... I mean, I never see Paul dial it in or phone it in when it comes to Kiss. But for me, nothing beats when you have a happy and enthusiastic Paul Stanley, who looks legitimately psyched and happy about the direction that Kiss is going in.
Yep.
Which I think he has for the past decade, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
He seems like he's pretty content with things. There's nothing like that. That's the best. It's really good.
One last question before I let you go. What's
Sure.
the future hold for PodKISSt? What are your goals at this point? You've done a lot of episodes. You've had a lot of people on the show. You've had people come and go. But you guys are still out there. What are your hopes and aspirations to keep being able to give the KISS community or yourselves?
I guess a personal goal of mine is to upgrade my equipment. I'm still using the external microphone on the iPad or whatever it is. I need to actually invest this year in. I mean, I'm talking into a nice microphone with cool gear and
I've
stuff.
never used these before. These were bought fresh for this event.
Is that, know what?
I don't usually record this way.
Necessity is the mother of credit card bills. New equipment for me, but also just I think not resting on laurels, but just keeping the momentum going. I'm so grateful to have Ken Mills. No, he is PodKISSt, and I'm so blessed to be a part of it.
All right, Gary, thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you for everything you do for the KISS community.
Cheers. All right, we're on the air here at the Rock and Pod Expo in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm joined by good friend Alan Tate of the Ages of Rock podcast. You're one of the 3 amigos who runs that show. Tell everyone out there who may not have heard your show what it is you guys do and why they should listen to you.
Well, the Ages of Rock podcast consists of me, my friend Bill Algie, and our mutual friend Dennis Talbot. We liken ourselves to 3 guys sitting in a bar, bullshitting and busting each other's balls, and occasionally we get somebody on the show and interview them.
So you're basically like every other podcast. We're just pretending to be in a bar, but not actually drinking beer anymore, talking about music.
Right. Mostly we drink water and coffee when we're doing our show.
That's because we're a bunch of old farts now.
Yeah, that's true. I'm the youngest of the old farts in our group, though. I'm only 48.
Okay, yeah, I'm younger than you. So, obviously, I've been on your show a few times, so thank you very much for those invitations.
You're always welcome on the show.
And we've had you on ours as well, haven't we?
That's correct, and we still need to do that should have been a single.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're out there, you can just steal a topic that Alan suggested. Just send the checks to the Ages of Rock guys for all the royalties that you get from listens and hits on that. So let's talk about you as a KISS fan. When did you get into the band, and what was it that drew you to KISS?
I got into KISS probably in 78 or 79. My introduction to Kiss, I must have seen Peter Criss perform Beth on TV or something, because that's the only Kiss song that I really knew at the time. And my babysitter, I was about to turn 9 years old, so I would have been in mid-'79. She asked me what I wanted for my birthday. I told her I wanted the record with Beth on it. So Destroyer was my introduction into Kiss, and it's just been downhill from ever since.
Nice. So that was your first album. What's your favorite Kiss album?
Harder Than Hell.
Why?
It's just, I love all those songs on it. There's something about it. I don't care if it's got muddy, shitty production.
It's got a unique sound, that's for sure.
Something about that production makes that album great for me.
It gives it a character that you can never replicate.
Right. And I think that if they found all of the tracks, went back and tried to remix it, it would sound like shit.
Well, it'd be like putting bass on Metallica's Justice for All. It wouldn't sound right because we're so used to it.
Didn't we just have this conversation like yesterday?
We did. So there you go. All right, what flavor of Kool-Aid do you drink, Alan?
Oh, the blue Kool-Aid.
You're a Fraley guy?
I'm a Fraley and a Simmons guy to the end.
That's awesome.
And the funny thing is I saw Simmons in Fort Wayne the week before the Indie Expo, and then the following week I saw Ace. So I got my Kool-Aid fix for the year.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with that combination. All right, pimp your show and tell people where they can find you.
You can find us on agesofrock.com.
What's your most recent episode?
Our most recent episode was like the drummer from the band Red Rain. They're guys, I don't think they're quite my age, but they're kind of older guys, and they're still out there doing their thing. And they've got Chipster PR as their representation, so they're picking up some pretty good shows.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Alan Tate, thanks for joining the KissFAQ podcast and telling us about your show today.
Thank you.
Hey, Peter, you're from the I Love It Loudcast. You're at the Rockin' Pod Expo here in Nashville today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your show and what brought you to Nashville to be a participant in this event?
Sure. So a little bit of the history. We're a fledgling podcast. We just got started in April. We're up to episode 8. And honestly, largely the impetus to do this is just me and my partner, Vinnie Vincent, who's my co-host, just have loved this type of music forever. My wife calls me, the king of useless knowledge, all the minutia I know about Kiss and Cheap Trick and a million other bands. And Vinny has the same passion for this music. And honestly, Julian, I've been listening to nothing but podcasts for the last 2 years, one of which is yours, which is top notch, which is one of the ones we hold in very high regard. It's something I've always wanted to do. And my wife finally said, will you two knuckleheads stop talking about it and actually do it? So we looked at each other and said, what the heck, let's give it a shot. And so I'm here to kind of meet all you guys. It's a pleasure to now finally put, a lot of you I knew the faces, but to actually meet you and shake your hand and tell you what, your podcasts have meant to me and Vinny. And hopefully someday our podcast will mean something to somebody else. But we love the music. We love to deep dive. And it's a passion.
There's a lot of respect between the podcasts. So that's what I enjoy
it's amazing.
About this event.
The just the outpouring of support, people giving us pointers, just pointing us in the right direction, what to do, what not to do. I mean, it's like friends that, it seems like I've known you guys forever, and I'm just meeting you. It's such a gracious community. There's no ego. It's just, we're just trying to...
There is a lot of ego, but you know what? Most of the people will keep it in check because... Yeah. I think anyone who does a podcast is doing it from a point of passion, number one.
Yes.
We may have some characters on other shows, on our own shows, that you may have a little bit of drama here and there. But all in all, it comes from passion. It's about passion.
Yes.
And it's about the music. And everyone has to share and wants to share. So, anyone who wants to get into the podcasting game, everyone has a voice.
Yeah.
You don't need special gear to do it.
Yeah.
You don't need technology. You can do just Skype and a call recorder.
Yeah.
And off you go. And once people listen to you, if they like you, they keep listening
Sure.
to you. And I think everyone who does a show respects the listeners, that they are giving you their ears for an hour or 10 minutes or whatever. It's still time.
And the great thing about podcasts, unlike, live radio, you got to 30-minute commute. You listen to half while you're on your way to work. You listen to half while you're on on your way back.
Free.
Yeah, and it's free.
Yep.
And just the takes and the different opinions. Opinions are like, you know what?
Yep.
Everybody's got one. But that makes it so colorful,
Yeah, so we're a KISS podcast, and I want to ask you, what was your first KISS album?
Okay, my first KISS album that I ever bought was Rock and Roll Over.
Awesome.
And
best album ever by the band.
Best album cover, best album ever, even though my co-hosts will disagree. And folks, if you listen to our episodes 3 and 4, we call them From Ace to Ankh, Part 1 and Part 2, going through all the Makeup Era albums. And we have some good banter on that, but I agree, it's my favorite. I remember being as a little chubby kid in the 6th grade, getting on my bicycle, driving down to the local record store called the Vinyl Jungle, seeing that album cover. I'm like, holy cow, what is this?
Yep.
And I mean, KISS was masterful at drawing you in, obviously, with the visual before you even heard them. And I was hooked. And KISS and Cheap Trick have been my 1 and 1A since the 6th grade. I'm going to be 52. So for the last 40 some odd years, I've listened to them religiously.
Isn't it amazing that here we are at this age and they are still around? Paul
Amazing.
Stanley
Amazing.
is still a master, a maestro of the circus. I mean, Psycho Circus. A maestro of the Psycho Circus.
Yeah,
the way
good one.
He is on stage. One of the best frontmen, if not the best frontman ever, in my opinion.
Well, you talk about, do you think, Julian, all those years ago, they would have figured that all these years later, they'd still be up there? When you think about it, what a masterful concept. With the outfits and the makeup, you're kind of ageless and timeless.
Absolutely. And they still look as good today as they did back then.
Yeah.
Maybe not as much up close. You can see some of the wrinkles.
Sure.
But who cares? The fact that they're still doing it, got to respect that. I want to ask you, what is your, your first album obviously is Rock and Roll Over. What's your favorite KISS album? When you're down in the dumps, you need something to pick yourself up.
There's only one thing that's going to do it the way you want it. It's still Rock and Roll Over, baby. When I put on, when I dropped that needle on my vinyl, I'm a vinyl guy. I got over 500 albums. I have all my KISS albums that I bought originally back when I was in grade school and high school. When that needle drops on Love 'Em, Leave 'Em, and I put it up to 10, I'm transported into a different world.
Yep.
I think that is Ace Frehley's best guitar solo ever, by the way.
I think that's his best sounding guitar on a KISS album.
So great.
On Rock and Roll
So
Over.
great.
I mentioned it with one of the people I was speaking with earlier. The sound, the sonic dynamics on that album.
Wonderful.
As a reaction, I don't bash Bob Ezrin and Destroyer, but they are two completely different beasts. Destroyer is a thing of beauty. The passion and the attention to detail with which it was recorded. When they took all of that and threw it away and said, this is us and what we can do without any of those additions, bells and whistles, and just let every band member breathe, then you get an album that's fantastic like that. And they were never able to replicate that again.
No, I see. That's my opinion.
Too much. They went too far. They weren't able to keep it organic.
Yep.
And obviously, they recorded the two different ways. So
they went one step too far on Love Gun. And while I love Love Gun, if I could have Love Gun done the way Rock and Roll Over was done, it'd be the fantastic 2 in a row.
Yeah, I say
Not that they aren't.
That's the same case with many bands. I always say Motley Crue's Theater of Pain, if it sounded like Shout at the Devil sonically, it would have been, those songs would have been
Julian,
better.
this is scary that we're a very like mind on these subjects so far. So maybe you're my brother from another mother. I don't know.
You never know. It may be that upstate New York water.
There you go.
All right, so what flavor of Kool-Aid do you drink? And that is, who is your favorite member of the band?
Ace Frehley is my favorite member of KISS and my favorite rock star of all time, has always been and will always be.
That's fantastic. Again, as I say, you can't pick there's no wrong answer
to
any of these questions. It's just nice to get to know people and where they're coming from in terms of their KISS point of view. So where can people find your podcast?
Okay, again, our podcast is called the I Love It Loudcast. We're on iTunes. Obviously, it's free. You can find us on iTunes. You can find us on Podchaser.
Right.
Also, a Facebook page of the same name. You can find us on Facebook at the I Love It Loudcast Facebook page. Please, folks, listen, rate it, share it. We're just getting going. We love this. We would love to hear your feedback, show ideas, whatever. But it's just, again, it's something we really, really love doing, and I hope I can be doing it as long as you have, my friend.
Well, there's people here like Ken Mills and the PodKISSt guys. There's Michael Butler, who's been doing it a lot longer and a lot better than I do it. And that's no disrespect meant to the guys on my show, but we press record, we press stop, and I put it up. There are guys here who put a hell of a lot more effort into their shows. They will take a couple of weeks to put theirs together. I don't happen to want to do that.
Me neither. I'm lazy as the day is long.
Then again, there's no wrong answer. There's no right answer. And anyone checking out a podcast, remember, they're free.
Yeah.
All you have to waste is your time.
I know.
And then if you didn't enjoy one of our shows or episodes, don't just write us off. Come back and try a different one and see if it works, or check out another podcast and see what you like.
Yeah, and like give us a chance too, folks, because again, me and Vinny knew nothing about going into this. Shout out to my co-host Vinnie Folletti, who would have loved to be here today, but he couldn't make it. Vinny, gosh, he does all the technical stuff. He does the hard work. I just open my big mouth and talk. So he does all the hard work.
That's all any of us do. We just open our big mouths and talk, and that's the fun of it. If we're fortunate to have partners that we get along with and really like, then, I come out of every show respecting my co-hosts and enjoying the conversation.
Yeah.
To the point where I don't actually care if people like the show, because I've enjoyed my conversation with my friends.
It's funny because
my wife isn't going to talk to Kiss about me other than when you're getting that shit off the wall.
Exactly. I've been in bands my whole life. I've sung in bands my whole life, and my wife of 21 years, who I love dearly, she's my best friend, doesn't even come to watch us play. She's just not interested in the music. But Vinny's 10 years my younger, so he's living vicariously through some of my Kiss stories and my Kiss adventures, and it's been so fun.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you very much for joining us today. Best of luck with your podcast and your show, and you know what, just keep having fun. We will. Julian, thank you so much. Folks, you are listening to one of the best in the biz right now. This guy knows his stuff. He knows his Kiss minutia. It's a great show. Keep supporting Julian, and please check us out. I Love It Loudcast. Awesome. Thanks a lot. All right, so we're back at the Nashville Rock and Pod Expo, and I am joined by
Brad Page.
What's your show?
My show is called I'm in Love with That Song. What I do are 15-minute episodes where I kind of take a deep dive into a particular song. We take a look at all the little elements and features that make it a great song. It's not really about music theory, but we do kind of talk a little bit about song structure, recording techniques, and highlight certain cool little elements of a song. For example, one of the shows I did is a Paul McCartney song called Daytime, Nighttime Suffering. In the middle of the song, there's a little bit where there's a baby crying. But I must have listened to that song 100 times before I heard that little piece in there. So, every song reveals itself to you over time, and you can listen to a song 100 times and still discover something new in it. So that's what I try to do in the show. Now, are you guys centered in any particular genre or era, or are you open to all aspects of music history? It's rock, but it's rock in the broadest possible strokes. So I've done newer stuff. I've done vintagey stuff. Just basically it's songs that I like. Now, what about a band like Kiss? You done any of their songs, dissected any of them yet? I did, yeah. I did an episode on Flaming Youth, because that's a pretty interesting song. Just the genesis of it. Yep. Between, you've got a piece that's an Ace piece, something that's a Paul piece. You've got the Gene Mad Dog piece. Yep. So I actually inserted a little clip of the demo of Mad Dog in there. You've got the 7/4 time signature section. You've got the guitar solo is it Dick Wagner or is it Ace? Personally, I think it's Ace. I don't know what your take is on that. There's some punch-ins by Dick on there, without a doubt, but it's based on an Ace track. I think he's just punching in note for note in a couple of areas where maybe a bend wasn't quite right, or a little bit of character was missing. Definition, salt and pepper, seasoning. Right. Yeah, well, that's kind of the way that I look at it. See, it's either Ace or it's Dick Wagner doing a really great Ace guitar solo. It feels like Ace. Absolutely. Yeah. So, whenever I talk to anyone, I always ask them, what was their first Kiss album? So what was your first experience of Kiss, whether it was an album, a song, or whichever? Yeah, well, so I was born in the 60s, so I was of that age when they were hitting their peak, 14-ish. Right. I think the first record I got was Rock and Roll Over. That makes me smile every time I hear that today, because such a great obviously record. There's a lot of love for that album. Yeah, and then from there worked backwards to Destroyer and Alive. Alive is the record that's the closest to my heart, whether it's really live or not, doesn't matter. It's
So you're
a
lucky.
great record.
You only had to work back a few albums, so you start with Rock and Roll Over. I
Yeah.
came in an asylum and had a lot of a catalog to
Yeah.
purchase to work my way back.
Yeah, no, I literally grew up with it. I mean, for me, I was an only child. I am an only child. So I didn't have older brothers and sisters cluing me in on what was out in music. And I was a comic book nerd when I was a kid. And there is no better band to transition a comic book nerd
absolutely.
into rock and roll than Kiss, right?
Yep.
So that was my entry point, not just into Kiss, but into rock and roll. And it literally changed my life. I mean, I would not be sitting here. You know, I've been a musician for 40 years almost. I mean, all of that is due to this one band, really. So I have a lot of love for that band.
All right, so if I had to ask you to pick a favorite Kiss album, what would it be?
It would be Alive.
A greatest hits, basically, and the
Yeah.
best sounding of all those early albums in one format.
For sure. I mean, I love a lot of the early stuff. Dressed to Kill is a big favorite record of mine. I love that record. So that's almost more of a power pop record than a hard rock record, but I really like them. But no, the performances on Alive just bring those songs to another level. It's a great record.
It does.
The hours
Great
spent
sound.
playing air guitar to that record as a kid, none of those moments were wasted too. You know, it's just remember that for the rest of my life. You know.
Yeah, well, 43 years later, it still sounds as good and as vibrant and as powerful as it did the first time I ever heard it. So
Oh yeah, that's a great record, man.
I always like to ask people what flavor Kool-Aid they drink. Who's their favorite member of Kiss?
You know what? It'd be Peter.
Awesome. I've been dying for someone to give Peter some respect that he deserves and to actually name the Catman as their favorite.
I am one of the few people on the planet who believe that Peter's solo record is my favorite of the 4 solo records. No one else
Really?
ever agrees with me.
Really?
But I love that record. Yeah. Well, to me, you know, when you do a solo record, I think it should stretch beyond what your
Agreed.
band is doing, right?
Absolutely.
And his record does that more than anyone's.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, you got to be willing to let... I don't like to put any band, particularly Kiss, in a box, and this is what you do, right?
Yep.
And that record, it's not a Kiss record, but I'm not sure it should have been a Kiss record. You know what I mean? It
Absolutely.
should be a Peter Criss record.
It was a very honest album. He didn't try and be Ace Frehley. He didn't
Right.
try and be Gene Simmons. He basically presented himself the most honest of all 4 members, except maybe Gene's, with his being so eclectic and strange. Gene
Right.
was very honest as well. But, you know, Peter didn't go the ego route and fill it up with a ton of gas, somewhat diluting the honesty of it like
that's
Gene
what
did.
I love about it. And, you know, his voice was in its prime during
Beautiful.
that period.
I love Peter's voice. Always have, always will.
That's why he's my favorite member, because I just think he's the best singer in the band. Not to diss the other guys, but
No,
but he's a great
picking one
vocalist.
doesn't disrespect any of the others.
Right.
You know, it's all about taste and what it means emotionally, and that's what music should be. Does it touch you? You know, and it really is as simple as that.
Absolutely.
So, where can people find your podcast?
So it's called I'm in Love with That Song. It's available on Stitcher, iTunes, all the usual sources. There's a Facebook page. Just search for I'm in Love with That Song podcast, and it'll come right up. And it's hosted on Podbean, like a lot of the other shows here, so you can always find it on Podbean. It's easy to get.
Before we wrap, what was your last episode about?
My last episode, I just recorded one before I came out here. It's about Aretha Franklin.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, I take a deep dive into A Change Is Gonna Come, the Sam Cooke
Really?
song.
Nice.
Yeah, one of the great things about Aretha is when she covered a song, she didn't just cover it, she owned it, right? She made it her own song.
Yeah, Otis
So-
Redding certainly thought that she had owned his song.
Absolutely. And it's true almost every song she covered. But yeah, she's one of the greats. The one before that, it was Glenn Hughes from Deep Purple. Just one of, I think, the greatest singers of all time. So
Great
good
set of
stuff.
pipes on that, man.
Man, he's great. Yep. He's on the road right now, too, so I'm going to go see him in September. Looking forward to that.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for joining us on the KissFAQ podcast. It's great to meet you in person and hang out in Nashville.
Thank you so much, Julian.
Cheers. Hey, this is Julian back at the Nashville Rock and Pod, and I am joined by esteemed author of the absolutely incredible book, Van Halen Rising, Greg Renoff.
Hey, thank you for having me on, Julian. I have to say, I'm sitting here looking at a table full of your books. You are an esteemed author as well, and it's great to talk to you. I love your books, and I'm really happy to be here with you.
Hey, this is going to be a fun chat, the Mutual Admiration Society.
Sure.
You know what? I love Van Halen and what you did with the storytelling in that book. What gets you to a point where you decide to do a book about Van Halen when the brothers aren't really the most approachable and open in talking about their history, particularly a very early part of it?
You know, so I I grew up a big fan and then went on to be a historian. I was actually teaching college, and I had a huge collection of circus magazines and all these interviews with different members of Van Halen that I had read over the years. And there were always these holes in the story, I thought, when I would read these interviews, because of course no one had ever put the story together of their beginnings. And it would be how David Lee Roth joined, or of course the most famous for our purposes today is the Gene Simmons saga. And the dates would be kind of screwy, and I'd say, well, that doesn't seem to make sense. It couldn't have happened in 1977. This couldn't happen in 1975. And I just started thinking that there's a pretty big story there. And I ended up beginning to delve into that a little bit by talking to some people who I found on Facebook, a couple people, and one thing led to another with people from Pasadena, California. And I sort of saw this whole world that opened up about Van Halen fandom that as a fan, I could be interested in as a fan. This whole period from 1972, 73 up through 1978 when they become Starz after they have their first record come out. And I saw this is like a whole undiscussed era of their career. And for me as a fan, I was sort of burned out on the Sammy versus Dave debates. You know, what's the best Van Halen record? I mean, we've all kind of we tread over that ground so much, and just to think, wow, they were playing backyard parties, they were playing in Hollywood at the Starwood, at the Whiskey A Go-Go, they were playing the Pasadena Civic. They had a following big enough where they could attract 3,000 people. As I started to find in 1977, before they had a record out, when I started to sort of get all those pieces laid out in front of me, I thought I should write something about this and sort of write this book. And eventually it became where I was going to write a book. I kind of also had this inkling that, as you kind of alluded to, that Van Halen brothers were probably never going to write a book. David Lee Roth's book, which I really enjoy, Crazy from the Heat, people should read it. It's a really good insight into Dave's mind. It's not a linear story. It sort of jumps from thing to thing, and you really have trouble kind of saying what came first, what came second. How did they go from playing house parties to playing clubs on the Sunset Strip to finally getting a record deal and opening for huge bands, Anaheim Stadium, LA Coliseum? And so that was, for me as a fan, I wanted to unveil that period of time for myself. And then it sort of took on a life of its own. I realized there's a lot here and that I think other people will enjoy.
Roughly how many years did it take you to put all of these pieces together? And the writing, I mean, you really write in an organic, very relatable manner, which is very easy to follow and a pleasure to read.
So I really, I would honestly say, I first started researching the book in the 80s. When I was reading these magazines, I'd be like, oh, wow, they played at Gazzarri's. I think, doesn't Warrant play at Gazzarri's? I sort of kind of hear these stories. But I really started at a crawl in 2010, kind of reading some old interviews. I would read, kind of going over that ground. Then I found some people on Facebook, as I mentioned, who are from Pasadena. And it was just a matter of almost doors opened. Like this person would say, hey, you should talk to my friend Jack. Jack had a house party in 1974 where the police came in a helicopter and flew overhead with a spotlight and broke up the party. And then I get to meet Jack, and Jack tells me the story, and I'm like, wow, that's quite a story. And then I talked to other people, and they'd be like, yeah, we went to Jack's party, and it was sort of all kind of opened up from there. So it built up from 2010 to really 2012, 2013. I was kind of writing in earnest, and then it came out in 2015. There's the editing process, as you know from having done many books yourself.
I don't know anything about editing. Well, as my critics
I've read your books. They are edited, and they are proofread, and they are put together. So
fortunately, the ones with Tim McFate were very well edited, but my own. So I want to ask you about something that KISS fans have been most interested in the last year is Gene Simmons' Vault,
right,
and the legendary demos with Edward and Alex.
Sure.
Have you had the chance to hear those since the Vault came out?
I have heard snippets. I do not own the Vault, and I have not heard them. So I've heard samples that have the loops that have went on online of the 30-second samples or whatever. So I had heard about these demos from people that they had happened, and then I also was able to get a hold of an interview done by a journalist named Steve Rosen, who wrote for Guitar World magazine in the 80s, very successful, and he had an unpublished interview in full with Rudy Liren, who was Eddie Van Halen's guitar tech. And in that interview, which Steve gave me access to, he goes into kind of great detail about this whole thing, and I was very interested to kind of nail down what it was. And then I sort of went through the chronology to try to figure out when it fit into place. One of the big puzzle pieces for me was, when did Gene get involved with Van Halen, and what was the window of time was he with them? But to actually, when I heard they were coming out, I was stunned, because from what I understand, and I think you probably heard that same interview with Gene with Eddie Trunk from 15 years ago, where Gene implies that he approached the Van Halen brothers and said, "I'd like to put these out," like around 2000, and when the first Kiss box set was coming out,
and they shot him
they were
down.
like, "No." And so the fact that he actually went ahead with it, I was frankly shocked. I assumed that they signed a release back in the day. I'm sure they did sign a release of some sort for Gene, where they basically said, we're appearing on your demos and you have the commercial rights to them. But maybe they came to some sort of agreement or a payment. I don't know what it was.
Well, they did, because what had to happen in order for those to be released was Gene had to trade the multi-tracks, the demo sessions, for the rights to release it, and then both parties went away happy.
So we can put the reels away in a box and never see them again now.
So now Edward has everything in his vault. And I guess as it goes as an artist, he has control over his own material,
right?
Which is very important to him in particular, and what he wants to maybe not do in the future, or I guess Van Halen fans always hope that something like Demography would one day become an official product with Edward sources.
Well, one of the things too I always thought was quite interesting, and I'd be interested to hear what you thought about this, is that after I listened to Christine 16 with an ear and understanding that Edwards was involved in that process of that song being created, and I thought about Jamie's Crying and how close those riffs are.
Yeah.
I mean, I really think that Christine 16 sort of birthed Jamie's Crying
or the guidance that Gene was giving him, because he tortured Edward during the recording of that song. I think he had to do 4 or 5 takes of the solo, and it is written about in Gene's vault book by Ken Sharp.
Right.
That it was quite an arduous process, because Gene was adamant about the style of solo that he wanted.
Right.
And on the other songs, Got Love for Sale, Edward goes to town, and that's a completely different beast than the version that Ace re-recorded. So very interesting from that kind of perspective with him.
Yeah, and it's also, to me, I think it's a real testament to what great musicians the brothers were, because I think it gives sort of a whole different. From what I heard, texture. They were obviously had done so many cover songs that they could kind of come in and be like, it's like this, and Gene could sort of produce them and get them to record the way he wanted the songs to sound, like you said, like kind of coach up Edward. And he obviously had the eye for talent, the ear for talent. He picked the two guys who could have done it and couldn't done any better.
Those two might just go far.
you might have a future, young Edward.
Well, it's just a shame now that after having a taste of a reunited Van Halen recording material that nothing's come since, especially the stuff that they worked on being, basically reshaped early demos and stuff. That's the most disappointing part with Van Halen for me.
They, I think it's always one of these things where people ask me, and I'm sure they ask you, is Van Halen retired? And I don't know. It's hard to know. I mean, we won't know until the final day comes where it's over. But it sort of seems like there's not much urgency to create new music, to put it out there. Or certainly, I look at artists like Jeff Beck, for example, who has got to be 75 years old, and is always doing something new. And everyone has got the right to do whatever they want with their career, their prerogative. But certain individuals have obviously much more of a burning impulse to try to continually create new music and put it out into the world, and other people don't. I mean, Tom Schultz, right? The other flip side of the coin, years and years and years of not doing anything, and suddenly an album appears. So maybe that's what we'll get. Maybe we'll get a new Van Halen record.
Who knows? I at this point, I wouldn't mind an Edward solo album, as long as he doesn't sing. Let me just qualify what I just said.
He was the original. If he was the original singer, right before Dave, he was singing, which is there was a reason why they chose Dave over Edward to be the vocalist of Van Halen. But I think back to early 1985 when Dave was walking away from the band, there was some talk that Edward was going to do a solo record, basically to give them some breathing room, to kind of put out all the stuff that was non-pop oriented Van Halen. And then of course they found Sammy and away they went. But yes, I would love. I mean, I always think about the fact that people would line up out the door, out of the front of Edward's home in Coldwater Canyon, all the way down to Hollywood, musicians of the highest caliber to be able to play on that with him. And so, if he wanted to do a solo record and he wanted to, say, hey, would you guest Eric Clapton, would you guest on my record? Pete Townsend, would you guest on my record? I mean, these guys would be, be happy to do it, and it would be amazing. But it's something that maybe we'll get, maybe we won't. I don't have much hope that's going to happen, though.
So let me back you up into a corner and ask you a couple of Kiss questions.
Sure.
First Kiss album you either owned or heard?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, when I was a kid in 1976, I remember very vividly seeing the Spirit of 76 poster on somebody's wall across the street from my house. I was 7 years old. Really, my first time that Kiss became on my radar at all was probably Lick It Up. probably. That's what I'm trying to remember. I mean, of course, I knew who Kiss was. I'd heard of them, but it was sort of this thing where Kiss was over.
Right.
Some like 83, 84. I don't think Creatures of the Night was something I would have heard on the radio or seen on MTV, and so that was kind of my window into a lot of these bands. But then I definitely the Lick It Up video, which of course is it's a whole nother topic of conversation. That video is very memorable. It's sort of what it is, and sort of the girls and everything. And so yeah, that would be my first real, I think, experience with Kiss, beyond probably hearing Beth on AM radio as a kid or something, which didn't register with me. Yeah.
Okay, so if I made you pick a favorite Kiss album, what would be one that you would be proud to say is in your collection?
I've got a number in my collection. Probably my favorite is Destroyer. I just think the songs, the production, the performances, the whole package is there from beginning to end. And the other records, there's some I like more than others, but really that's probably my ultimate. Alive, another one I really, really love. Of the 80s records, if I was going to pull one out, I probably would go with Lick It Up. Is probably the one I like the best out of those records. I have my moments where I will enjoy something off Crazy Nights or something, but yeah, it's
totally. All right, so Color of Kool-Aid, which member of the band most impresses you, or you'd say that you think of Kiss and you immediately think of this member?
Yeah, I mean, I think Gene, because of the Van Halen connection. I know that sounds like the obvious answer for the guy who wrote the book about Van Halen, but that's really for me. I always have found Gene's approach to everything from the beginning. I first saw like video interviews with him on MTV, or he would be with Martha Quinn or whoever he'd be sitting with talking to about Kiss when they took the makeup off. I mean, I actually remember seeing that. Yep. And they're like, they've taken the makeup off. In fact, now that was kind of triggering for me. And of course, that was for me as a non-Kiss fan. I still knew about Kiss and makeup, and I was like, oh, look at these guys. Look what they look like. So I just remember Gene had this sort of air of defiance and arrogance about him and his confidence that really kind of stuck out on my mind as a young kid going out. He really doesn't really care what people think, apparently, so.
All right, so what's in the future for Greg Renoff? What are you working on?
So my current project is the authorized autobiography of Ted Templeman. So I got to know Ted, the record producer, really well during the making of Van Halen Rising, and I asked him if he would be interested in working on a book with me, and he said yes. And I kind of explained to him my motivation for that was not solely Van Halen oriented. Obviously, that's a big part of the story. But when I got to know Ted and talk to Ted in the time where the book was already out, we started talking on the phone and having conversations. It was that Ted had been an artist. He'd been up in a soft pop band called Harper Bazaar in the late 60s, and then Ted also was somebody who worked at the very bottom at Warner Brothers. Actually, he started as a tape listener, so he went from being a guy who had a gold record on Warner Brothers Records to a guy who they hired as basically like, yeah, you can work in the mailroom and listen to tapes. Here's the Doobie Brothers, and is able to get an opportunity to produce with Lenny Waronker, who went on to become the president of Warner Brothers and did like every a million successful records that we've all heard on the radio. Lenny and Ted produced it, and sort of have that story of a guy who's a jazz buff, a musician himself, goes and he's in this pop group. He's on with George Burns and Louis Armstrong on these TV shows, these variety shows, to this pop star, to then being like, it's over. What do I do now? I want to be a record producer, and kind of starting at the bottom and working his way up to find Van Halen, to find Doobie Brothers, and to have such success. And the other thing I'd say about Ted is that interested me was when I got to know him, he was such a humble, nice guy. I didn't want to be writing a book with somebody who was going to be just not pleasant to get to know. And Ted's a great friend and just a very, just a straight shooting guy who just really is a music lover. I mean, that's what it's about for him. It's about the music. It's not about like how many gold records would I have. It's about he's like, that's why I did this. I love music and I love making records just to make them, and talking about how that was his absolute motivation from when he was a kid listening to Motown records. Like, how did they get the tambourine to sound like that? Why does the drum sound different on this record, Sort of kind of become a musician and then realize record production is my thing.
Awesome. Yeah. So where can people find you?
Yeah, I'm at on Twitter at Greg Renoff. So it's GregRenoff. Feel free to follow me there, and I would love to connect with people through Twitter.
Awesome. Well, Greg, thanks a lot for giving us some of your time. Best of luck with the project. Look forward to reading it.
Hey, appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Andre LaBelle, thank you very much for giving the KissFAQ some time today at the Nashville Rock and Pod Expo. I just want to start at the top of your career. I read on your website your biography, and you said as a youth you were surrounded by artistic energy. So what led you into drums and music from that point?
That was my father. He was a professional artist. He painted all his life, and unfortunately, my mother passed away when I was young, but it was just us three, my father, my brother, and I. And he wanted, I guess, to devote his time to us because it was just us two boys that he had as far as the family. And he pushed us into music, and I was 10 years old in 76, so I mean that's when KISS was like right in the height of it, you know. And we were huge KISS fans, and he bought us equipment, and we started. I mean, our house literally was easels on one side and musical instruments on the other side. So that was it, man. Yeah.
So what made you pick up drumsticks? I mean, had you messed around with any other instruments before you settled on drumming?
I tried to play guitar a little bit. My brother was going to play drums, but we switched it up, you know, because he was taller and he would look better out front with a guitar.
So who were some of your influences then that you really aspired to first imitating as you learned your craft?
Oh, it was first of all, it was Peter Criss, obviously, because I mean I'm 10 years old in 76. But then later on, I got into like Keith Moon, The Who, and I started listening to Pat Travers, Tommy Aldridge. That guy I still listen to that guy today.
He still got it today.
The phrasing that he created is so unique. Nobody can do it like Tommy Aldridge. Though, I mean, everybody does like that quadruplet kind of thing, 2 with the hands, 2 with the feet, and you get it kind of quick, and it sounds like a rumble, you know.
Okay.
But Aldridge was doing things with 3s with his feet that was completely unique, and is still unique to this day. So I would say Tommy Aldridge. That was the guy that really put me into what I wanted to be. But then as I got older, I got into the fusion stuff with Vinnie Colaiuta and, you know, Dave Weckels and Jeff Porcaro's and all of that, you know.
So you've mentioned that you were a KISS fan, that you were affected by them, you know, in the 1970s. What would be your favorite KISS album then?
I would say probably KISS Alive, that Alive album, because I remember listening to that with headphones on and hearing the crowd, and it felt like you were at the concert, you know. And I hadn't been to a KISS concert before I'd gotten the record or whatnot, so it was that experience of, I think that's the album that actually made it happen for him, because people were able to experience that live energy from KISS on that album. So that would be it. Yeah,
you finally felt the emotion and the power
Positively.
coming through that vinyl.
You know, and the photography had a lot to do with it as well. You know, the image. I mean, we exist through 5 senses, man. I mean, eyesight and hearing are the 2 biggies. It's so, I mean, obviously, what you see is going to be significant as far as what you're taking in, your perspective of things, and I love that. I miss the show. I miss the image and what was happening during the 70s, you know, and hopefully it comes back, but things have changed, you know.
Absolutely. What do you recall of your first band? You were in a band with your brother, weren't you?
That's right.
And you started to play. So tell us about starting building up as a live performing musician.
I appreciate that. My brother will appreciate that. I mean, he was a huge Ted Nugent fan, and it was really him just trying to be like Ted Nugent, basically. And we went out playing clubs when I was like 13 years old, trying to be like a Ted Nugent cover band. And he had the leather wristbands with the studs on it like Nugent had and all of that. He was 15, you know, I'm like 13, and that was the beginning of it. But we actually had local success when I was really young. I was 13 years old, and the major radio station in our hometown, Expo 102, put us on an album that they did, and they played our song all the time on the radio. So I was 13 dealing with that, you know. And,
wow.
And that experience was so much fun, and there was so much energy that came from that I fell in love with it and never stopped. That's all I've ever done is play drums, you know.
So with all of that early kind of success, and
Positively.
I know you guys did the grind out on the East Coast, and you worked really hard. You decided to relocate to the West Coast when you were 20, didn't you?
Yeah, man.
Why?
Well, Scott Travis had moved out there, drummer for Priest.
Yep.
He played with Racer X. We were friends, and he lived in Norfolk, and he told me he was going to move out there. So I always looked up to the guys playing. I mean, when he was playing in the bars when I was younger, he was killing it just like he's doing today. That guy is a monster player. So he moved out there, and I'm thinking, well, maybe I should probably follow suit and move out there as well. That's kind of what made me move out there.
Right, so you hear a lot of the horror stories of people who've kind of gone from the Midwest or the East Coast to the West Coast. I mean, Axl Rose and the guys at Guns N' Roses kind of sung it and shown it. How do you survive out on the West Coast without falling victim to a lot of the bad stuff?
Yeah, man. Well, money has everything to do with it as far as like to get you in a safe situation, a place to live where you're safe and secure. I didn't have any money. I was always poor, but a good friend of mine named David Clemens, an incredible guitar player. This guy, his mother managed an apartment complex in Santa Monica on 4th and Pico, and he was able to get my wife and I in that apartment complex. So I had a place where I would be safe and all of that, and a friend, that I could count on.
Right.
And that's, if it wasn't for him, I would have never made it out there.
So how do you start establishing yourself on the West Coast? Obviously, you left all the people you knew, all your connections, kind of, other than Scott.
I approached anybody I could, man. I mean, if I was out there and somebody told me that this gentleman here at the bar is involved with radio and he's got contacts, I would walk up to you and introduce myself. That's what I was doing every day, nonstop, man. Just introducing myself to people. And there's so many famous people out there. Like, you would see famous guitarists standing at the bar, and I would walk up and introduce myself. But a lot of times, it wasn't easy because I would do that, and they would kind of get pissed off, like, leave me alone, that kind of attitude and all of that. But I realized that was going to happen. I used to make notes on how to approach people and what to say, like what didn't work in approaching people that I was hoping to make a contact with, and all of that. I mean, I'm like 21 years old,
right?
And that's what I was doing. I mean, it has everything to do with relationship with people, making a connection with people. That is literally what our existence is,
Yeah.
So it was all about that, man. And I got the gig with Vinnie Vincent because I was in Guitar Center, and Michael Marnock from Steppenwolf was standing at the counter, and I overheard that he was the original guitar player in Steppenwolf and was looking for a drummer. So I went up to him and I introduced myself, and I said, could I audition for you here? Because they have a drum booth in Guitar Center. I could just take you in there and play for you. He was like, no problem. So I go in there and play for him. We start recording together. About a year and a half went by where I hadn't heard from him, and he wasn't able to get the deal that he was looking for and all of that. So things just kind of went south with it. But he referred me to Vinnie, and I get a phone call from Vinnie out of the blue. But that had everything to do with me approaching him at Guitar Center. If I hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have got the gig with Vinnie. So that technique, and what I'm saying as far as meeting people and having the will to introduce yourself to people, was everything to do with at least with my small bit of success.
Well, social media, old style.
It really,
right?
Yeah, man, it really is.
It's called networking. And I guess it paid dividends for you. So let's talk about Vinnie Vincent. How did you start working with him? What did the process entail between you meeting Vinnie and him saying, you're the guy who I'm going to work with?
Man, I mean, I got the gig after the audition. I guess another thing that has a lot to do with that is being in the zone and just playing well at that particular moment. You know how sometimes you might be in a certain mood where you just kind of feel nervous or something, and you're talking to somebody and it doesn't really work out. You're just in a certain ill zone, But that time where I auditioned for him, I was at my peak. I was feeling good. But it was a nervous situation because I didn't even meet Vinnie until I'm at the studio. My drums are set up in the drum room, and the engineer, Rick Barcelona, approaches me and says, well, Vinnie's going to be in here in a minute. And he just wants you to do a drum solo, So he comes in, introduces himself, sits down in a chair, and has me play a drum solo. So, I was like nervous, dude. I was like reaching in the stick bag. I remember looking at my hand as I went into the stick bag, and my hand was quivering, and I was like, man, this ain't good, But back to the point, I was in a good zone that day, I guess,
right.
And I played really well. And he was impressed, and that was it. After that, couple of days went by where he called me to come hang out with him and have dinner with him and all of that, and he offered me the gig.
So let's talk about zones. Vinnie had been through a rough time. Obviously, the story of what happened to the Invasion. The guys who became Slaughter and went on to multi-platinum success. What was Vinnie's attitude like? Was he, was he down, or was he fired up to get in there and really start building a comeback?
I never experienced Vinnie being down, as far as like any kind of thing that he said or the way he was acting that really showed that he was worried or stressed. I mean, he seemed to be pretty in control. I hear all this stuff about these things about Vinnie where he was hard to work with and all of this. And personally, I really can't relate or add to any of that, because I never had any problems with the guy, man. He was very humble and laid back. It might have something to do with that. I grew up in Virginia, and I hung out when I was young around a lot of bikers and stuff, and I'm used to like harsh attitudes.
Right.
Vinnie was like very laid back and peaceful, and the whole time I was with him.
Well, he seems like a very quiet-spoken
Yeah,
person.
man.
But
Yeah.
When we talk about drummers and Vinnie Vincent, we often end up talking about drum machines or the
Yeah,
torture
man.
of Bobby Rock, which is well documented. How was his direction to you and what he wanted out of a drummer for the sessions that were basically Guitar-mageddon and Guitar Some Hell?
He didn't allow me to learn any of the material. He wanted me to play it just off the cuff. I put the headphones on behind the kit. Once we went through all these drum sets and got it set up to where it was the set that they wanted to use, which was a mix of a lot of different drums, Ludwig toms. I think we used the kick drums from Carmen Apiece, Slingerland drums on a couple of the tracks. But after getting all that down, he had me set behind the drums, and he would play the track just a few times so I could hear it in the headphones.
Right.
And then he'd have me just come in and go for it off the cuff. And when I got through the verse, maybe halfway through the chorus, he would stop recording and start talking to me through the headphones. And he would say, try something like this, or let's maybe do some more accents with this particular phrase here, or just kind of dictate it. And rewind the tape and have me go at it again. And that's the way the whole album was recorded.
Were there any guide drums on these tracks that he was playing for you?
It's just the click track.
Just the click.
Yeah, just
so
the
he
click.
was really
yeah.
wanting your gut interpretation.
Oh, yeah.
With the guidance that he was giving you.
That was it, man. Yeah, I mean, I'd never recorded that way before, but I think it was really smart on his part, because I ended up playing a lot of stuff I never would have thought of, and I didn't have a chance to really be analytical and think about what I was playing. It was literally coming from the heart. I was just feeling the music and making it happen. So, I mean, that's how I recorded the tracks. But later on, after the sessions were done and Enigma went south with Vinnie, and Vinnie was looking for another label to get behind him, years went by. And the tracks that I recorded on the 2-inch reel tape, I'm not even sure whether he lost ownership of it, because Enigma paid for it. So those tracks might have been shelved to where he couldn't even get them.
Right.
And then started working with drum machines on his own.
Essentially, 96, he did release an EP with some material. I don't know if you've heard it, but if you did hear it, was the guitar work the same as you recall playing along to?
Some of the songs and some of the guitar riffs were the same, but it wasn't me playing drums on it. This is where I think the budget was different, and he was doing it maybe in a smaller recording sense, and he used the drum machine. I think I know better now to why he had drum machines on those recordings. I think that's what happened. I think he lost the ability to use the tracks that he had recorded with Enigma that I was on. So he changed gears and went into using a drum machine in order to get that album out that you're talking about. I think that's what happened.
Right. So vocalist on this project is Robert Fleischman, who you worked with in The Sky.
Yeah.
What's it like working with a vocalist who, every time I see Robert, I'm always impressed by his demeanor.
Yeah,
if
he's a
anyone
badass,
screams,
man.
Badass, rock star, just he oozes class.
He's a badass, man. I was intimidated when I first was recording with Vinnie and I met Robert, And then once I got to know Robert, he's a sweetheart. The guy's got a huge heart, man. I look up to him big time. I mean, the guy, music is persona is part of it, man.
Yeah.
I mean, even in radio, it's that way. I mean, when you think of what was that guy, the Wolfman, from back in the 50s. I mean, it's a personality. It's an energy, And Robert has mojo. The he's a badass. Simple as that. And a brilliant songwriter. I'm absolutely honored that I got the chance to record those records with him,
Well, the Sky stuff that you've done,
Yeah, man,
with
that's
him
some
is
of the-
absolutely incredible.
I'm proud. That's some of my most proudest moments in recording, positively. But Robert he's a slick character as well. I mean, if you get your foot even near your mouth, he'll shove it in. You know, he doesn't play around. But I mean, I'd laugh at it. I'd have conversations with Robert where he would start giving me hell and teasing me and shit. And the insults were so funny that I couldn't help but laugh. So it's not like he's an asshole. He's just that kind of guy. You know what I mean?
Right. So, what's the status of the Sky now? I mean, is there hope for more? I mean, you put out 2 albums. Robert's done a solo album since.
Well, Robert's doing painting now. He's mainly doing art. But I just hit him up before I did this and chatted with him a little bit. I mean, I'm not sure what he's going to do as far as recording in the future, but I'd be surprised if he didn't record again.
Right.
I think if he doesn't, he's crazy. I can tell you that.
Vinnie was working with Gene and Paul at the time on some of the revenge stuff that eventually came out. You're a fly on the wall for us to a certain extent. I mean, do you recall him writing or working on material that he eventually took to Gene and Paul?
Yeah, I didn't hear any of it. I mean, I think Vinnie is a hell of a multitasker because we were doing the sessions for the drumming that I was doing. Now, Vinnie had already done guitar work enough, just tracks for me to play along with. So he wasn't in the studio playing guitar, but he was behind the mixing board while I was recording the drum tracks. But he was recording and writing with Kiss while we were doing that in the studio that we were at.
So he didn't ask you to knock out any drums for tracks that he could then take
Not
into
at all.
Gene?
I think the writing that he was doing for Kiss was more him going in the studio with them with the guitar,
Right.
and showing them ideas that he came up with, and then when he was done with that, maybe he would come back to the studio to where I was at, or however the scheduling was being done. But I didn't see any of it go down. I did get to know Gene and Paul, and I'd hung around them a few times while I was playing with Vinnie. But something interesting about that is that it didn't seem like Vinnie, you hear all this stuff about that Vinnie was like he sued Kiss for money and all of this,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't seem to have any problems with him when I was doing the tracking with him. He was writing songs for him. I think, man, the business, when it gets as big as like what the level that Kiss is at, that there's disagreements and arguments and things that go down and the emotion is only lasts maybe a few days or something.
Right.
And then they'll pull him right back in to do more work. It's something like that, because it doesn't seem like he really had any real problems with Gene and Paul. So I guess the business on that level, there's a lot of things that can screw up and go south,
Yeah, I guess on the business side, it can all come down the road years later.
And then they might call him back a year later, and then things are fine again.
Yep.
It's that kind of thing.
It's always better from my side of the table to enjoy the music and not the business.
That's right.
So,
yeah, man.
You're watching Robert do his vocals in the studio. Is Vinnie giving him the same sort of direction that he gives you on drums? Is he very particular to what he wants out of the? Robert's an instrument to a certain extent.
Positively, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, Robert wasn't going to stand for any for him telling him what to do. Robert is. That's probably part of the reason Vinnie loves Robert, is because his personality and his sarcasm and his wit with that. Vinnie, I think, is impressed with Robert's ability to do that. So he would. I was behind the board when Robert was doing some vocals, but Vinnie would come in and say something and tell Robert to try a little something, and Robert would just kind of shut him down, So that's how that went. Yeah.
Very cool. How did things kind of end with Vinnie? I mean, you recorded, I don't know how many tracks you did total, but...
I did like over a dozen.
Right.
Yeah, man. And there's a bunch of them out there on bootleg that's actually me playing drums. I don't know how they got out there, but they're on the internet. Trying to remember some of the titles, like
you got Cop
Ride the
Teaser,
Serpent.
Ride the Serpent.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Rocks
me.
On Fire.
It's the ones that are real drums is pretty obvious, you
Right.
know, and that's me playing drums on it. And there's a good number of them out there on YouTube right now.
Well, we don't know what exactly happened between Vinnie and Enigma. Yeah, how did things end? Did you just pack up one day? You're done with your part of things, and hope to hear from Vinnie. How did you kind of exit the scene?
That's really about it. I mean,
Right.
it's probably very similar to the relationships that you've dealt with business. It just kind of started fading away. Vinnie didn't have the money behind him to go back in the studio, so there was no reason to really call me, because there was no studio to go in, you know. And I started working with other people. I did a little bit of work with a project with Richie Kotzen and his wife, and Andy Susmill, great guitar player out of Germany. I just went to Germany with him and was out there for a couple of weeks doing recordings with him, and I started doing other things,
Right.
But I mean, it was very disheartening, man, because I mean, I was fortunate. I got my name on the Kiss family tree through it because the record never even came out.
Right.
That was a godsend, man, because I'm a huge Kiss fan, and to have that happen was incredible. So that very event itself, that my name got on that family tree on Kiss Alive 3, was worth the whole thing for me.
Absolutely. Time's at a premium today, so we have to keep you on schedule.
Yeah, man.
I'm going to ask you just one more question. What are your thoughts on Vinnie's reemergence? He's, basically come back into the limelight.
I think it's incredible,
in this past year. Do you have hopes that he will release Guitars from Hell or Guitarmageddon or whatever he wants to call it now? And would you prefer him to use your drum tracks?
I mean, of course, I'd love that, man. But my initial response and thought to him coming back out was relief, because nobody knew. Robert and I would have conversations about what was going on with him. And there was some conversations we had where we were wondering whether he was even alive.
Yep.
I mean, sincerely, nobody had heard from him. So, I mean, when he came out, I mean, I was just happy to see that he was okay. I mean, we're people, man. I mean, I want to play drums on great music, but it's more important for me to know the dude is okay.
Yes.
Because, I mean, me being able to play with him got my name on that Kiss family tree. And I owe the guy, so I want to know that he's all right, regardless of whether he uses me in the future or not. And he damn sure seems like he's okay. So that's cool. That's good news,
So would you take a call from him and be receptive if
Positively.
the opportunity arose? Would it be
Much
one of those
love
things
to
that
him.
you'd be
Yeah,
willing
man.
to revisit with Robert, perhaps working with him?
Positively, dude. I mean, but he's Vinnie Vincent. He has a lot of people he can work with. Who knows who he might work with? But hopefully he'll pull me in on some tracks. I would be honored. But if not, I'm looking forward to hearing on what he records,
Well, fantastic. That's a great positive note on which we can end. Andre LaBelle, thank you very much for giving the KISS FAQ podcast your time today.
Yeah, man. Awesome, brother. Thank you, man.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
All right, so here's Julian at the Nashville Rock and Pod Expo, and I am joined by Steve.
Correct.
And Greg.
From the band Lipstick and the Lipstick panel. Great to be with you in person. You're so much sexier in person, Julian. Like, your voice has seduced me for so long.
You're definitely wearing rose-tinted glasses if you think any of that applies.
Glasses.
I mean, they're purple. That's not really rose.
Well, it's obviously affecting your outlook on life. So,
I'm really happy. I got this Michael Bolton record for $4. I was hanging out with the guys in Starz and Angel. I'm having a great time.
Hey, there's a lot of people around here today. What do you think of some of the highlights in terms of the talent that you've had the opportunity to interact with?
It's less about, for me, the fandom thing, and more about just, like, having good chats with people about music. So, like, talking with you is one of the highlights. Just, like, hanging out with friends and partying. Like, that's what I'm digging about this. And because I live in Nashville, a lot of these guys I know. And a lot of these guys I run into around town, like Kenny Olsen, I hung out with him last week. So, like, oh, hey, you're a special guest here. Hey, do you want to hang out? It's like, but for me, it's about the out-of-town people and the friends, and that's what this is about for me.
Well, what's really good about today is there's air conditioning in here, and it's fucking hot out there.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I've not been out. I'm staying in here. I did want to thank you guys for having me on your show so many times. It's been a blast, every episode that we did.
I think
the last one with Creatures.
You're our most visited guest. You are number one. You are number one on the panel. If we're ranking people on the panel, that's you. You're number one.
I think that just proves what a whore I am, isn't it? He's a whore. A podcasting whore. So, obviously, we got to mention where people can find your show. Tell us about Lipstick, the panel.
Yeah.
And how that came about.
So we've been doing glam rock for the last few years. We're an original band called Lipstick. And in the modern social media age, you need to have new content coming out every week. And we were burnt out by the Instagram and Twitter bullshit. And just wanted to put out something that we liked every week. So we're like, you know what, let's do a podcast. Let's talk about music with friends. Let's make some new friends. And so every week we do a ranking show. take an album and we have we vote on it, on the songs, and our panelists vote on the songs, and then we figure out what the panel ranks the song. So what the best song is, what the least best song is, and it's a lot of fun. We do a lot of Kiss, we do Smashing Pumpkins, we've done Megadeth, Black Sabbath,
And video game soundtracks.
and video game soundtracks. We have sort of, we have our rock fans, we have our nerd fans, and they blend together sometimes, but it's a lot of fun. We've made a lot of great friends and enhanced our friendships with other people. It's been really awesome.
So where can people find you, both for your music, which I've been checking out some of your songs on YouTube of late, but in terms of your podcast, where can people find you? And for your band, where can people find you?
You can find us, all of that, on liftedgeneration.com. It'll have links to our music. It'll have links to the podcast that you can listen to on iTunes. You can listen to it on YouTube. And for the Kiss fans out there, if any of you like Mr. Phil Schaus from the Gene Simmons Band.
And if any of you say no, you're obviously idiots.
Right, because Phil is a very, very lovely individual and a great guitar player. He plays on 2 of our songs. He plays on You Can't Stop the Rock and Stop. And just phenomenal guy, great. And, it's cool for me as a big Kiss fan to be like, hey, that's 1 degree of separation between me and a guy who played with Gene Simmons. Like, my guitar player played with Gene Simmons. Like, that's so cool.
All right, so let's get a couple of Kiss questions in here. I mean, I've done quite a few of the album panels with you for Kiss stuff. Most recently, Creatures of the Night with Joe Polo from Podcast Rock City was also a guest on there. But what was your first Kiss album? Steve, let's start with you.
Well, you've been on the podcast, so you know this. I'm listening to them in order. Kiss 1 was my first Kiss album.
All right, Greg.
The Very Best of Kiss was my first Kiss album, because that was the one my dad had, and then after we saw Kiss, that was the one I borrowed from him. So what I like about that album in particular is they have a version of Detroit Rock City without the car sound effects, and you can really appreciate just the production on it and just how big those chords sound. And the thing is, the ending of that song is so much better without the car crash. It sounds so good. I don't understand. It confuses me.
Well, car crashes are a bit of a downer.
They had the car crash on the album version, and then they removed it for the Greatest Hits version later.
Right, and that was so
clearly they recognized that the car crash was a bad choice.
Yes.
All right, so while you're talking about favorite Kiss album,
I'll let Steve go first.
Dynasty.
So far.
Really? I thought it was Gene Simmons.
Now, I did enjoy the Gene Simmons solo album, surprisingly, considering I hate all of the terrible Gene songs about butt sex with teenagers.
Oh, that's brutal.
But Dynasty is your number one? I didn't know that.
That was all disco-y and fun.
And we have to qualify that statement with so far.
Yeah, so
because
far.
you're not done with your experience yet.
He's only gotten up to Creatures of the Night, which some people considered like the last great Kiss album. There's that and Revenge.
Yeah, there are some people listening who are saying, well, you can just stop there.
Right. So, but we're not. We got Lick It Up next. Mine is Music from the Elder, because I like JRPGs and progressive rock concept albums. So it's like, oh, this is Kiss doing the kind of music I've wanted them to do the whole time.
Awesome. Now, we always like to find out what flavor of Kool-Aid people drank. So in terms of a favorite member of the band or someone who inspires you versus makes you, uninspired, what flavor of Kool-Aid are you going to drink, Steve?
I find myself increasingly appreciating who Gene Simmons is as a person. As a fellow bassist, I recognize all of the fundamentally bassist things he does. Like when he writes a song and the bass line is just easy because he's lazy and doesn't want to work very hard. Or when he plays that same song live and the bass line is way more complicated because he's bored.
Or when he just has Ace Frehley play bass for him.
Right.
Or
so
Bruce Kulick. Or Tommy Thayer, perhaps.
I'm really starting to identify with the guy. Although not so much the butt sex with teenagers.
Well, yeah. Right. So you aspire to delegating your bass duties to someone else?
Yeah, right. I desire to be bored having somebody else play my bass lines.
And writing your songs, are you?
Right.
Well, that's a great business model for the modern era.
Have somebody else write songs and get paid for it? Sign me right up.
All right, purple glasses guy. What flavor of Kool-Aid are you going to drink?
My favorite member of Kiss is... so I think I'm most like Paul Stanley personality-wise.
Well, that goes well with the purple.
Right, but favorite is definitely Peter Criss.
Oh, hallelujah. Peter, that's the second person today, and it's, whenever we talk about Kiss, getting people, to send some love Peter Criss's way, it's a battle. So it's great that we've had a lot of love for Peter today on this show.
Yeah, just, real quick, some reasons. I mean, I'm a big jazz and swing guy, so I love that he brought that element to the band. He has a lot of, swing to his playing, which I know he's not a very heavy hitter, but I think his style brought a unique swagger to the band that would not have been there without it. I like cats. Cats are cute. And also, I love his persona, because at first I thought he was the quiet, sensitive one, and that attracted me. And then I realized he was like a cocaine-driven maniac.
Yeah, an angry tree shooter.
Right. And you know what? That made me love him even more for completely opposite reasons. But it just made him so much more fun. And so I was like, yeah, here's this weird guy who does jazz and does all the cocaine. You know what? I'm sold.
So wait, hold up. You're saying you have been bribing people to say that they like Peter Criss best?
I would never bribe anyone for anything.
Dang.
But yeah, no,
I'll change my vote for $1.
I don't have any money, and
that is the most Gene Simmons thing you could have said.
No, Peter Criss is an absolute sweetheart. Oh my gosh! And anyone who's met him in recent years has only seen a cuddly kitten. So
I'll give you one anecdote about Peter Criss. On his birthday when I was in high school, my buddy and I were big Peter Criss guys, and we would celebrate what we called Peter Christmas on his birthday, where we would wear Peter Criss makeup, listen to jazz and swing, and eat lots of spaghetti to celebrate being Italian. So Merry Peter Christmas, all of you.
There you go.
Shoot your Christmas tree with a shotgun.
That's a new one. Instead of Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas.
Merry Peter Christmas.
Awesome. Well, guys, thanks a lot for giving us some time. What's your future? What do you have planned?
Working on a new album. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Working on a new album and new podcast every week. So while you're waiting for us to make new music, listen to us talk about music.
Absolutely. So remind everyone where they can find you.
lipstickgeneration.com, and it has links to everything from there. The podcast, the music videos, pictures of us with cats, pictures of us with giant cats. All the things you want are there.
Well, go out and shoot a Christmas tree. Thanks a lot for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Let's jump straight in then, because you were both members of Looking Glass, which became Fallen Angel. Let's talk about how did Starz come about.
You want to start?
No, you go.
Okay. Well, Doobie's actually, and he likes to be called Doobie, not Joe. Just for the millions of people out there who are going to address him in the future.
If you know me, you call me Doobie.
That's it. He was actually in the original Looking Glass, which was a band of 4 players. They were a Rutgers frat band, and they really weren't that good. But they got better.
Thanks.
And they got signed to Epic Records in like about 72, right?
Late 71, early 72.
Okay, and they did an album. They got signed by Clive Davis at Epic Records. They did an album that very soon after just died. They produced it themselves. And about 6 months after the record was dead, it sold 4 copies, 1 to each family. And about 6 months after the record died, a DJ from Washington D.C. started. Am I doing good? I wasn't there, so I know the legend. Started playing Brandy, and it went from a dead issue to a #1 record. And if anybody out there knows how hard it is to even get a top 20 record, and to a top 10 record, a top 5 record, a #2 record, but to get a #1 record.
It was
nigh impossible.
It was #1 around the world this week in 72.
Damn.
I wound up selling 3 million copies.
That's incredible. Congratulations, even all these years on.
Well, it took not until it was in the first Charlie's Angels movie did I earn a dime. That was in the year 2000.
Then, of course, it just got used in Guardians of the Galaxy 2.
Yeah,
it's all about Brandy.
Right.
The story of Brandy.
So that's where I get my mailbox money from.
I've never seen it, but friends of mine tell me it's all about Brandy.
It is.
Yeah. So you want me to give you a quick
history you lost your singer for Looking Glass.
He quit because he wrote Brandy and sang it. They did a second record, and
still without him.
Yeah, still without me. And Elliot Lurie was the guy who wrote and sang Brandy.
Okay.
And he thought, well, I'm the guy. I'm the star. I can do my own record, and I don't need these guys. So he quit and got his own record deal and did a record. But we did but they got, and because he was going to leave, they got me. They auditioned guitar players, and I passed the audition.
You got Brendan from the back of the Village Voice.
There we go. Actually from an ad on a rehearsal studio wall, but that's how it happened. And so we did a tour with Elliot and me in the band, and probably was 3 months or something like that, 3 or 4 months. Then
weeks.
Elliot left, and we didn't have a lead singer, and so I believe it was my idea, because you guys were saying, you know, what we want to be a rock band, and we want to like get people to stand up and cheer and demand
hard music.
Yeah, and demand encores. And I said, well, you know, I think we should get a front man, you know, like a Mick Jagger guy,
right?
You know. And so we put ads in the Village Voice and showed all these guys show up, and you know, after about the second or third day, Michael shows up. You know, he's got a short haircut, Southern accent, powder blue shirt, and tight pants, and he sat down with an acoustic guitar and sang "Cool One," and you know, we all kind of looked at each other and went, oh, "What else you got?" He sang "Rock This Town." He laughed. We said, "Thank you very much." You know, we all looked at each other and said, "This is it, man. This is Elvis Presley. We just auditioned Elvis Presley. We got to get this guy." So we got him in the band, and then we functioned as Looking Glass for about a year. I'm just rounding errors. And we went out and gigged as Looking Glass. We traveled. We squeezed the last pennies out of the Looking Glass, and then we got some management that encouraged us to change our name. We changed our name to Fallen Angel.
Right.
We got signed again by Clive Davis. So Doobie got signed twice by
Clive.
Signed
twice
Davis.
by Clive.
Probably a unique achievement. Although Peter was in there too.
People can
say that. And we did an album for Arista Records that never came out, but 2 singles were released. They never did anything, and the deal was kind of dying. We could tell that their interest was kind of flagging. And right around that time, one of the manager guys somehow got hooked up with Bill O'Coin.
Right.
And Peter Sweevel, who's the bass player, also somehow knew through the social scene in New York Shaun Delaney. If you know who Shaun Delaney was. And so things just kind of melted together. And we thought, okay, we'll go with Bill O'Coin. And we were still Fallen Angels, but when Shaun got involved with us, things started changing. You know, we dropped the keyboard player.
Right.
We got a second guitar player, which was Richie. We auditioned, and he had the cutest girlfriend, so we got him.
You got him out of the back of the Village Voice.
That's right. He's the cutest girlfriend. He could also play, and and we changed our name to Starz with a Z. And then we worked with Shaun for several months, I'd say, at least several months, and developed a whole new thing. You know, a whole heavier, more, you know, jump off the stage kind of thing. And in that interim, we did a demo with Jack Douglas. Jack did the demo, right? Bill shopped it. He got offers from a bunch of labels. He picked, I guess, Capitol wanted to give us the most money, and that's how Starz began. We went back to Jack, did our first record, and there you go.
So Shaun Delaney, obviously very creative guy.
Great guy.
You know, incredible in terms of what he did for KISS.
Oh, yeah.
He basically did their show.
That's
Before him, there was no KISS show afterwards. What did he do specifically for you guys, creativity?
Well, he showed up at rehearsal every day and just kicked our ass. You know?
Right.
He told us we needed to look a little different. Like I had a beard and long hippie hair.
Mm-hmm.
He said, man, you're so good looking. You need to like take advantage of that.
Right.
You know, so he got me a haircut. He got me some clothes. You know, got us all black leather jackets. I mean, started spending some money, some KISS money.
So
on us.
image and moves and being rock and roll.
It's not that we didn't want that, but we just didn't know how to do it.
You needed someone maybe to help you?
And Shaun was probably the best guy in the world to figure out how to do that, you know? And he loved us, and we thought, yeah, this guy's like, he's the sixth Starz, you know? And he really was, man. He traveled with us. He really went to bat for us everywhere. I felt like that guy would take a bullet for any one of us, you know? Fantastic person, and what he did really worked, because even though we couldn't understand it at the time while we were doing it, you really can't. You don't know it. Things are happening a million miles an hour in the rock and roll world. In retrospect, you can look back on it and go, well, no kidding. You know? But it took somebody from outside the band to see that, to look at these group of 5 guys and make them a unit that made sense commercially in the world. It was easy to understand what we
rather
were,
than
you know?
watching a band, rather than 5 individuals.
That's right.
He was a interested party. where Shaun would be able to stand there and look at us and see what was good and what needed improvement.
Right.
As well as making, he made musical suggestions, he made theatrical suggestions, and he knew where to push and what to say and how to just like ramp it
he
up.
knew when he fought for his ideas. You know, because like a genius is a guy that just convinces everybody else that they're right and that their idea is right. And he would fight for his ideas. He wouldn't give up until everybody else just said, okay, just go ahead. I don't care anymore.
Right.
Just to shut
But
him up.
I have an interesting thing that I heard. You tell me if you've ever heard this, Dube, that Kiss kind of kicked Shaun to the curb after a while.
Yep.
And that he got involved. He wanted to have another band that he could make as big or bigger than Kiss to show them that, hey, it wasn't all you guys. You know, it wasn't 100% just you guys. You needed my help. And it's unfortunate that we didn't become as big as them, because that would have made Shaun, that would have really been great for Shaun. And so it was a disappointment for him as much as it was for us that it never happened in a gigantic way. But we have a legacy, and Shaun is an equal part of that legacy as the five guys in the band.
Just as much as he should have been up on stage with Kiss in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. From my conversations with him, he felt discarded.
And he knew he wasn't the guy to do that, but he was the guy to be able to be that catalyst.
He didn't need to be the star. He wanted to see people up on stage that represented his beliefs in what they were doing.
What Shaun did with them, he then took and did with us.
Right.
Yeah. And it worked. It just, certain political things, certain choice, the choice of the record company, people have criticized, and, just things happen.
It's
And
business,
sometimes
it's rock and roll.
Yeah, and sometimes, like, if you have a song like Cherry Baby, which, I didn't know it at the time. It seemed pretty commercial. But when you have a song like that and it stalls at number 22, you just think, what more can I do? Like, how can I make anything that's more in the marketplace but heavy and still conforms to the true identity
playable,
of the band? It's pretty debilitating, I mean, you start getting a little cuckoo behind it, like. You wonder what you can do. How can I do better than that?
You certainly have the producer. Your first two albums were produced by Jack Douglas. I mean, you can't do better than that in that time period.
Yeah,
how did he get involved with you? What do you remember about being able to retain Jack Douglas?
Jack? Well, I think Alan Miller, who was the manager that went with O'Coin, I think he knew Jack. And I wouldn't doubt that Bill probably knew Jack.
Alan Miller was hooked in with Bob Ezrin, if I recall correctly. So, and Jack was in that area.
I guess.
Yeah.
I guess.
Who
Something
knows?
like that. Yeah, that might be. I mean, we're not talking. Wasn't there a guy named Alan, somebody that was an orchestrator for? Wasn't that guy that was a string writer? I think you might be talking about that guy. But Alan Miller was the guy who was a manager for us before O'Coin, that went with O'Coin and got us with him. So, anyway, I mean, I just heard one day, hey, how would you guys like Jack Douglas to produce you? And I didn't know who he was from Adam, but Richie did. Said, man, he produced Get Your Wings. And I thought, what's Get Your Wings? I mean, I never was in the hard rock thing,
right.
And but Richie knew all about it.
He knew exactly who Jack was, and he wanted him.
But somebody said, well, he had something to do with Who's Next, and I don't know whether he really did or that's a story. But as soon as somebody told me that, I thought, well, shit, man, if he can make Who's Next with us, I'll go there every day of the week.
Absolutely.
So and he was great to work with right off the bat. Great ideas. Great vibe, got us the right situation, got things to sound really good, and no stress. I mean, we did the first album in 3 weeks from start to finish. It was mixed. It was from the first day to the last. It was 3 weeks. I mean, that's light speed.
Yep.
Compared to even then, it was fast.
It came in fully cooked.
Yeah.
Well, you'd had your whole lives basically to write that album,
right.
so
That's right.
it road tested, refined, arranged.
Yeah.
Bang, you go in, you lay it down.
Violation wasn't quite that easy.
And we did that with Shaun.
That's
Shaun
right.
was an absolute participant in getting that first album ready to go.
Right, and has some co-write credits on some of those songs, and even some co-write credits on some Violation songs.
Jesus.
Yeah, turn it up.
What?
Yeah.
So, obviously, you're signed with O'Coin Management, so you're in the KISS gravity well. You've got Shaun Delaney helping you. This is, I guess, specifically for you, Joe, because you're flipping through the vault book there.
And see where I was.
Yeah, you're on there. You're in there. You got 3 mentions for Eat Your Heart Out, I Know Who You Are, drumming with Gene Simmons on demo sessions. You know, how did Gene come to you and start having you work with him as he's laying down ideas? He was notorious for just getting an idea, going in, cutting it. How did he approach you?
Well, you know, I knew Gene long before I ever saw him play. I always saw him around the office, and we just hang around and shoot the shit and go out to lunch and stuff like that. But he also saw Starz play, and he knew that I could play.
Right.
And so that when he had an idea, he would just call me up and said, I got some studio time at Electric Ladyland, come on down. I remember one time it was about midnight, I was buck naked, had one foot in bed, the phone rings, it's Gene. He says, come on down, I got the music, I got the studio. So, okay. Put my pants back on, got in the car, drove into New York, and recorded with him till dawn.
Absolutely.
And just did, it was just me and him in the studio. We just came up with, he had stuff that he wanted to play on the tape, and it was just me and him making it up as we went along. And then he used that to refine how his songs were structured, and then he would maybe play it as a demo for the rest of the guys and go on from there.
So I'm going to ask you straight up a question that's been bothering me. There's always been a rumor in the Kiss Army about Peter Criss not drumming on the Alive 2 side, the studio tracks that he did, Larger Than Life, Rocket Ride, all that stuff. Did you ever ghost? Were you ever the Dick Wagner on drums? Dick obviously did session work in place of Ace, and that's well known.
Doobie signed a non-disclosure agreement about that.
I have to ask my attorney, Michael Cohen, on that.
That's right.
So we'll find out from Michael on CNN later.
Yeah, Michael Cohen will tell you that one after he gets out of jail.
Well, Robert Mueller investigates the history of Kiss.
We wouldn't want there to be a violation.
But I think there are some other players on some things. I think Andy Newmark might have played on a couple of things.
I've been told as well that I did some of the sessions that I did with Stanley may have used some of that stuff.
Right.
I don't know.
And that's not to disrespect Peter in any
absolutely
way,
not.
because it's business.
No, I can't. You didn't hear it from me. Peter and I both had the same influence of Gene Krupa.
Right.
We both cite Gene as a primary influence of how we play. I met Gene when I was 13 years old. My two influences are Gene Krupa and Keith Moon, both of whom I met.
Right.
I met them both.
So in terms of Starz and the career that you guys had, 4 albums in the classic era,
Right.
Why did Starz not make it, in your opinion? What was missing? Was it just that it's music and something didn't happen? Or did you not get the support of a label? Did you not get on the right tours, do you think?
Well, I was there at the end. Brendan had moved on before that. But I think when we got done with the tours for Coliseum Rock, we sat back and we looked for a minute, and we wound up in Los Angeles. And there was a lot of, I don't know, this is a technical term, there's a lot of mishigas going on in between the band and Old Coin and Capitol and everything, and it was just swirling all over the place. And what wound up happening is we imploded.
Right.
What we should have done is taken 6 months off instead of not breaking up, but simply just say, all right, I'm going to go home for a while and I'll call you in a half a year. That would have been smarter, but instead we all said, fuck this, I'm out of here, and that was it. So we imploded instead of maybe just taking a break, and that would have, I think, been a smarter thing to do, because it's rock and roll is a war of attrition.
Yep.
He who lasts the longest wins. And now, if we had simply stayed together, I think we probably would have still been around doing it big time.
Awesome. So let's get you guys back on schedule.
Okay, yeah.
We'll call that one here.
Pot, and then we're going to head up to the stage and do a little.
As you wish. This was a treat for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you both for your time today.
Buddy. Appreciate it.
That was very cool. Very cool.
All right, this is Julian at the Nashville Rockin' Pod Expo, and I am joined by
Stephen Michael from the Growin Up Rock Podcast. I am in Atlanta, and my partner in crime, Sonny Hollywood Pony, is located in Wisconsin.
and sometimes in the Bay Area.
And sometimes in the Bay Area.
I like Sonny. He's a powerful and attractive Hollywood.
Yes, he's got more followers than Gene Simmons these days.
So tell us about the podcast. How did it come about, and what made you decide to jump into the podcasting game, and what do you bring to the show?
I grew up on classic hard rock and metal. And quite frankly, when I was doing an hour-and-a-half commute
to and from work, I didn't have a whole lot to listen to, and I was tired of radio playing the same damn 3 hard rock songs from bands, and there's so much more out of there, and I have a lot of useless knowledge, and so I wanted to put that to good use. So I wanted to start doing a show that combined talk with actual killer deep cuts. So that's kind of where the idea came from originally, and then there's a lot that popped up along the way, but for me, it was all about kind of going back and remembering the good times and the stuff that we grew up on. So it was, it was those memories and those stories of the first time you heard that Van Halen record, the first time you heard that Kiss record or whatever, what was going on in your life at the time. How did you end up a music fan in general? Because there are people... My wife, she's kind of indifferent to music. She likes music. I think we all like music, but some of us are really serious music fans. Anybody that's doing a podcast is a music fan because everybody I've met, right, yourself included, we gravitate towards music and we have all this crazy knowledge like, this Def Leppard record or this Kiss record or this engineer on this record. We have all this knowledge. So that was important to me to kind of share that with the world. And if I'm sharing it with some 15-year-old kid in Australia who's never heard the Van Halen Fair Warning, then great. Good for me. So that's what it's all about.
You might be turning people on to music that they don't know.
That's right.
There's a lot of young people out there who are now getting into metal.
Yep.
And the archival metal that no longer even exists.
Yeah.
They're digging into bands. They're going to Amoeba. They're buying records. They're really getting into a lot of this because of what podcasts are doing. So in a certain way, you're also holding the torch open to a whole... holding the torch for a whole bunch of different music out there.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it before. It's like we don't know where the future rock stars are going to come from, because if people are growing up loving Beyonce and Jay-Z and stuff like that, and listen, there's nothing wrong with that, but where is the curators, and this is a great word, where are the curators for everything that we knew and loved in the late 70s, 80s, and 90s? MTV's no longer in existence. Sirius XM hair radio is going to play the same 2 songs, the same as regular radio.
Just like FM.
Same as regular FM radio.
Playlists.
So there is no more curators. You and I were sitting across from the table looking at each other. We're the fucking curators of this shit.
That's a scary thought, actually. So tell me about the last episode that you put out for Growin Up Rock.
Last episode we did for Growin Up Rock was, I'm trying to remember because we release an episode a week, and usually when I push that release button or schedule it, I'm on to the next one. So I know that I know we just did a top 5 Dokken episode, and I think we just released or we're about to release an episode that's called Hey, Who's the New Guy, which is all about replacement players that came into bands and contributed immediately to the band and the band's sound. So, for instance, a lot of people don't know that Neil Peart was a replacement player for Rush.
Absolutely. September 74, he replaced Rootsy.
And so the 15-year-old kid that's just hearing Rush for the first time might not know that. He might only know Neil Peart as being the drummer in Rush, but there was a guy before him. So we talk about that kind of stuff, and, we mix up interviews. We either do an interview episode or we'll do a themed episode, which is whatever hits our fancy bone. We did one not too long ago that I thought was really funny, where we revisited the Filthy 15, the PMRC's Filthy 15.
Oh my God, really?
And so we went through a whole thing. We played this whole the Congress interviewing D. Snyder thing. We played that.
And Zappa,
and then we talked about should those songs have been on the Filthy 15 or not, and what are some of the songs today that should be on that Filthy 15, and
everything.
It was kind of fun, because some of those songs were like, okay, why is this on here? Like Def Leppard's High and Dry, the song was on the Filthy 15. It's like, okay. you know?
It had the word high, and that is a dangerous word.
You know, but in 86, I think it was, I don't know, you have to forgive me, but it was in the 80s, and even in the 80s, I don't think that was a big deal. So I don't know what they cited drug abuse and drinking, alcoholism to that song, but I mean, like, Wasp, Fuck Like a Beast, should have been on the Filthy 15.
That's kind of understandable.
Should have been on the Filthy 15. We have no problem with that. But, Darling Nikki, that's really what started the whole thing, because
you can totally understand why that would be on there.
You know, I don't get it. But, yeah, so we have fun on the show.
Awesome. So, obviously we're a KISS podcast. You guys listen to KISS. I'll give you my standard inquisition that I give everyone I speak with. What was your first KISS album?
So my first KISS album was probably Creatures of the Night. I may have had Alive, the first Alive, but I think Creatures of the Night was actually the first KISS record for me. I got into KISS a lot later than everybody. I saw The Phantom Meets the Park, but I wasn't a die-hard like crazy KISS fan. You know, I like them. I liked them as a hard rock band. I was like, I like this band, but I wasn't into it like everybody else. And I went into the music business when I was 16 years old. I started working for a local venue, and true story, the first show I ever worked was KISS Animalized tour, and I set up Eric Carr's drum kit and stood backstage next to Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons going, holy shit. Because I was a 16-year-old kid standing on a stage behind Eric Carr's drum kit on a riser looking at an empty arena. How fucking cool is that? That's still incredible. Have my backstage pass from that tour.
That's an absolutely amazing story. I mean, you just never know when you talk to someone, some of the stories with KISS. I mean, KISS is like a cancer in some ways.
Yeah.
They permeate every aspect of Americana.
Yeah.
That you can talk to anyone, and they probably have a KISS story.
Yeah.
And you got to sit behind a drum kit and look out in an arena. That's
as a 16-year-old kid.
As a 16-year-old kid. I mean, that ties in, perfectly with like Ace Frehley.
Yeah.
Talking about how he roadied for Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
So it's a cycle. It's a circle.
It really is. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about music fandom. I mean, I think you have to be a music fan first to really, really seriously get the geekness that we are discussing, I think that the average music listener doesn't necessarily get how deep it goes with some of us. Music has been an emotional thing in my life. It's helped me through tough times. It's gotten me through a lot, and I'm no different than a lot of people. I know that. I get it, but there is no right or wrong with music. It means different things to different people, and one man's ear candy is another man's trash, It just and it doesn't matter. They're not wrong or right,
Here's what I like to remind people, that music doesn't know left or right. Music is the soundtrack of our lives, no matter what we listen to. We may not like Megadeth, may not like Anthrax, may not like classical, may not like pop, but at the end of the day, music unites us a lot more than anything else in this world or in this life.
Yeah, that's right.
Anyone can hear a song and be pulled back 30 years to a moment in their life that was special to them.
That's what's amazing. That's kind of what Growin Up Rock is all about. Is I'll talk to an artist and I'll say, dude, take me back to that time when you were 16. What was it that flipped the switch for you and made you a fan? And you can see their eyes and in their head, like jumping in the Bill and Ted fucking phone booth, right? And it takes them back to that moment, and they'll recapture that. I've had a couple of like fairly emotional moments where you can tell that the person that I'm talking to and they're telling me about it are seriously emotional about it. I mean, and that means a lot to me because it's such a passionate thing about music,
So let's talk a little bit more about KISS.
Okay.
What is your favorite KISS album? You've told us your first.
Yeah. So it's hard because it's like anybody else. So we
It changes on a daily basis.
It changes on a daily and sometimes hourly basis. We do a KissStoric moment every episode on our show, and it usually ties into what the theme is. So depending on the theme, we'll do a KissStoric moment. We'll play a song that ties into the theme somehow. And whether it's a cover version of a Kiss song or an actual Kiss song, it is what it is. But for me, I really, really like Rock and Roll Over. Rock and Roll Over is a really good record. I also really like Love Gun. Yep. So there's some really good stuff.
Now, do you think Love Gun would be better if it sounded like the production on Rock and Roll Over?
You know, I don't think.
Or do you think it's perfect as it is?
I don't think the production is terrible on Love Gun. It's. I have a problem. I think that I would really, really, really love Hotter Than Hell as an album if the production was bearable. Production for me on that record just is not bearable. I love those songs. Parasite may be one of my all-time favorite Kiss songs, if not my favorite Kiss song, but it's hard with that production. It just is. So if I would love to hear Hotter Than Hell in like today's mix, like if it sounded like Creatures of the Night or something like that. But those songs, I would be interested in hearing that. Like, I think that would be amazing.
Awesome. So let's go to the bar and talk about Kool-Aid.
All right.
What flavor of Kool-Aid are you? Who's your favorite member of Kiss?
You know, I think that I've probably always been a Paul Stanley guy simply because I think I like or gravitate more to the Paul Stanley songs. Usually the upbeat, heavy, fast, and his register for singing wise is a sweet spot for me. So I think probably I gravitate, but more and more I kind of like Gene, these things and listening to getting to be friends with the guys in his band these days and kind of sharing stories and talking about some of that stuff. I'm starting to appreciate him as an individual. So, yeah. That's it. That's kind of it.
They're an amazing group of guys, those Gene Simmons band boys, aren't they?
They are. They're fantastic. I love those guys. I'm living through their eyes and enjoying the ride.
They're keeping music alive. Some of them are a little bit younger than most of us.
Yeah.
And, they're still holding that torch high for rock and roll.
Well,
watching them in Indy, they were doing Montrose. They obviously played with Lita. They love rock, and the Rock and Roll Residency is a kick-ass experience.
Oh, it's fun. I've seen it twice now, and you can figure out real quick when it's coming from an honest place. You know what I mean?
When the passion is there, the honesty is on the face.
Exactly, and so you figure that out real quick, and those guys are as passionate, as honest as they are about rock and roll.
All right, so tell my audience where people can find you.
People can find us at the Growin Up Rock Podcast. That is GROWINUPROCK.com, and you can find us at any of your favorite podcast outlet. You can also follow us at Growin Up Rock, and that's Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. And go check out the Julian Gill episode we did. Mr. Julian Gill's been on our show.
I have. What was the episode?
We did we did like what did we do? An Indie Expo preview or what did we do?
I don't know. I guess people are going to have to go find out.
Yeah, go look it up. It's in there somewhere.
All right. So thanks a lot for joining us. Enjoy the rest of the day, and I will see you soon.
Thanks, Julian.
All right, so this is Julian back at the Nashville Rock and Pod Expo. I'm joined by BJ Kahuna of the Rock and or Roll podcast. How you doing, BJ?
I'm good. Thanks, Julian.
For
it's
people
good to see you again.
Yeah, you too. It seems to be this yearly get-together that's really being built up well by Criss Inzak and the crew.
Yeah. It's looking good. It's looking pretty good this year. It's nice.
So for people who don't know you, shame on you first of all, but tell everyone about your podcast.
Yeah, my podcast is Rock and or Roll. Julian's been on 3 episodes, I think.
Power Age.
Yeah, High and Dry, Zodiac Mind Warp, Power Age.
Yep.
Or Power Age.
Power Age, as of course we know. That was a fun episode. Most fun I've actually had doing a show. And the High and Dry, I mean, anytime I get to pontificate about Def Leppard, always enjoy that. But you do all sorts of different off-the-wall kind of music stuff. You're
Yeah.
not just sticking to one thing. What's a highlight of your show that people who don't know your show should give you a chance?
Well, I have a huge record collection, and I just play like I do episodes I call AOR AOK, where I just play random AOR songs from all kinds of obscure artists, and a lot of my episodes are just like 20, 25 songs that most people have never heard before. So it's sometimes it's just kind of a over-the-top radio show, but then other times I just do band-specific episodes and stuff like that. But I've got 240 something episodes now, so there's over 2,000 different bands been played on the show.
Damn, that's a lot. I did check out some of your episodes that you had a lot of early 70s New York City glam.
Yeah.
That was a great episode with John Montgomery.
Yeah.
You interviewed.
Yeah.
And some of the other stuff that were precursors to Kiss in many ways. That you got some great stories out of him as well. So, there's a lot of eclectic stuff on Rock and or Roll that's really fun to listen to. So I strongly recommend that people check you out. Now, obviously, we're a Kiss podcast on the KissFAQ. So what's your favorite Cheap Trick album?
My favorite Cheap Trick album is the first album.
Hell yeah. I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
Ken Mills has been making me go through their catalog and really start educating myself about them. But now let's get back to Kiss. What was your first Kiss album?
When I was 5 in 1979, my uncle, my mom's youngest brother, who was probably early 20s, he was a big Kiss fan, and so he got me into Kiss. Like 79, I was Gene Simmons for Halloween, and we had like a tape of Kiss songs my uncle made me. Just like everybody else in 1979, I lost interest in Kiss for a while.
Yeah, that seems to happen to a lot of people.
But then I got back into them like around 12 years old when I really started getting back into music, and I just got all the albums probably got everything within like a year or so, like birthday, Christmas, just getting them with my allowance.
Yeah, it was the same with me.
I remember my friend Nick put Dressed to Kill on a tape for me, and that's what really made me go nuts. And that's still my favorite Kiss album, but I just had like a dubbed tape of it, so not even sure what the first one is that I actually own.
I often feel like we should be explaining what a mixtape is to some of the younger listeners who live in iTunes. That's really something that I remember taping songs off the radio and just building up a mixtape. It was never planned out what it was going to be on there. So obviously you've just mentioned your favorite album is Dressed to Kill. Why? What is it about that album that makes it your favorite? Is it the sound? Is it the songs?
It's both. I think, I'm not sure if this is correct, but it might be the only Kiss album where I love every song. There's not even one song that I don't really like or don't really care for.
Right. There's not much that you could actually call filler on Dressed to Kill.
I mean, I know some people don't like some songs in there, but I just love them. I know people don't like Room Service. Some people make fun of Ladies in Waiting or something, but I think it's such a cohesive album. You just listen to it all the way through it. It's so much fun. It's such a fun album. And they basically produced it themselves, right? And it's like it's maybe their best sounding record to my ears.
Essentially, I mean, it does balance great sonics with also the pressure of writing it in a hurry because of Neil demanding that they produce another studio album.
Yeah.
That they worked well under pressure, especially when you consider some of the stuff that they didn't use, that they were able to come up with such high quality stuff. And Paul's stories about a song like, say, Come On and Love Me, and how quickly that was written.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, a song like that was basically an emergency. And look at the quality of Paul Stanley's writing at the time, or Gene's Ladies in Waiting. I mean, I know some people that's not one of their favorite songs, but it's an incredibly well-crafted song with a kind of cool story.
And if you listen to Ladies in Waiting in the context of the album, like you're just playing the record, it's awesome. Like if you take it on its own, like that's the only song you're going to listen to right now is Ladies in Waiting, it's a different experience than hearing the whole record straight through,
All right, so my final question for you is, what flavor Kool-Aid do you drink? Who's your favorite member of Kiss?
Well, my favorite songwriter in Kiss is Paul Stanley for sure.
Absolutely, yep.
But, as far as just I've always loved Ace Frehley. But when I was a kid, Gene was my favorite. When I was 5, I got the Gene doll, and I was Gene for Halloween 2 years. Right. And so he was my favorite then. So,
all of the above, in other words.
I guess Peter's my least favorite.
Sorry, Peter.
It's hard not to say Ace, but Paul was such a great songwriter.
I've kind of said that, Paul Stanley is the heart and soul of Kiss.
Yeah.
He steered the ship through the stormy sea. And a little bit of an elder reference there, but he kept the weight of the band on his shoulders for much of the 1980s, their most difficult period when Gene was off trying other things, working with other bands, doing the acting, or what is loosely described as acting. Paul stuck with it. He didn't do solo albums. He didn't produce a tremendous amount of other bands. So it's kind of hard not to give him the love and respect, or Ace, because of what Ace brought in terms of the guitar sound, which is so critical to the band.
Yeah. And then Ace's solo album is just so great that it's,
40 years on. Who would have thought? Ace really knocked it out of the park with that solo album.
He really did.
All right, BJ, where can people find you and your show?
Probably the easiest thing I say now is just Google Rock and or Roll Podcast, and then you'll see all the links for iTunes, Blogger, Facebook. It'll all be there,
That's my snarky comment to people who ask questions on the KissFAQ message board. Google.
Yeah.
It really will provide you with all the answers that you need in life.
But if you Google Rock and or Roll, you get Simpsons stuff, because that's where I got the name from. Reverend Lovejoy said it. So you got to add podcast at the end, then you get all mine.
What's your most recent episode, and what was it about?
AOR-AOK Volume 11 came out yesterday. And then the week before, it was an episode called Hey, which was all songs that started with Hey.
Oh, cool.
So
that's what I'm talking about. Quirky topics, very well done. You put a lot of effort into your show. The episodes that I've been on with you, you really did a good job producing. So it's been an honor to be on with you. And thanks for joining us on the KissFAQ podcast today.
Thanks, Julian.
All right. BJ Kahuna from the Rock and or Roll podcast. Thanks so much.
Thank you for spending time listening to the KissFAQ podcast today. All sales are final. There are no refunds. If you'd like, look us up on Facebook or come over to the KissFAQ message board and discuss the topic we broadcast today. Don't forget to rate us on iTunes, Spreaker, or wherever you've listened to the show. We hope you'll join us again.